Weaving on a cardboard loom. You're going to need a cardboard loom, string, yarn, some beads, and a pair of scissors. So today we're going to make a weaving on a cardboard loom. Here's the loom, and the first supply you're going to need is some string. And string is different than yarn because string is thinner. This is yarn and this is string. Okay, see the difference? The yarn is fluffier and it has actually different fibers twisted together. String is a solid fiber. So we're going to take the string and we're going to tape it to the loom, the beginning end. So here's the end of my string and I'm going to tape it just like that. Then I'm going to wrap it around the loom, one slit to the next slit, around and around. And I'm not going to cut it until I'm done wrapping because I don't know how much string it's going to take to get around the loom from one end to the other, going around and around, one slit to the next slit, and now I'm at the last slit. So I'm going to go to the back, I'm going to cut my string, and I'm going to put a piece of tape over that one piece of string. Done with the string. I don't need string anymore. I can pass it off to somebody else or put it away. Now I'm going to take some yarn, any color you like. So I have chosen this little bundle of yellow. So the first thing I have to do is unravel it. And I'm not going to use the whole thing all at once. So I'm going to take an arm span and I'm going to cut it. All right, about as wide as the table. Going to take it on my loom and I'm going to weave. Okay, gonna go under, over, under, over, under, over. Pull it through. Now you need to stop when it gets near the end, just like that. So I just stop my piece of yarn right there. Okay, now I'm going to go back where I came from. Okay, so I went under, over, under, over, under, over. Now I have to do the opposite. I have to go under this one, over this one, under this one, over this one, under this one, over this one. And I'm going to pull it through and slide it up. Don't pull it too hard or else your warp strings, that's these, they're going to buckle and squish together. We don't want that to happen. We want them to lay straight like they are. So last time I was here, I went under the string. Over the string. Now I'm going to go under the string, over the string. Under, over, and pull it through. Do not pull it tight like this. See how that string is moving? We don't want it tight like that. If that happens, wiggle it back to where it was and come back to the end. Now, if you don't do opposite, so you see this string here, last time I was here, I went over it. Let's say I forget what I was doing and I do the same thing. So I go over, under, over, under, over and under. Okay? When I pull it through, anybody have a prediction what's going to happen? Yeah, it's going to come apart. Look, because I did the same as the last pattern and watch, it disappeared because it didn't lock in to the strings because I didn't do opposite. So I have to be sure that every row I do the opposite of what I did on the last row. Now, am I weaving on the back of the loom? No, I'm only weaving the front side of the loom. Over, under, over, back and forth, down the loom. Okay? Under, over, under, over, under, over. And I'm weaving back and forth. After you have woven your very first yarn length, you will then be doing something different. And I'll show you as soon as I get there. So I'm going to stop the video and weave the rest of my yellow till I get to the end of my yellow yarn. And then I'll show you what we do next. So start weaving your under, over, under your rows and try and keep them straight so that they don't get puckery. You don't want your lines to get squished up. We want them to try and stay straight down the board. Okay, so just slide them up and go back and forth, weaving across how to tie on a new yarn. Okay, so I've come to the end of my yarn. I cannot go across, there's not enough yarn. So what do? Well, I can choose another color of yarn, or I can continue with the yellow. I picked another bundle of yarn. I've got some white yarn. I want to make it a little interesting. So I'm going to measure the yarn as wide as my table, and I'm going to cut it. Here comes the tricky part, all right? I'm going to tie the two pieces of yarn together. You're going to make an X and go underneath the X. Make another X and go in the circle and pull. You have to learn this skill. It's 2 shoelace knots. Second graders should be able to tie shoelaces. Work on this knot. Now I'm going to just continue weaving because now my yarn is longer because I tied the two pieces together. And you can just leave that little knot inside there. So I'm going under, over, over, under, back and forth just like I did before. But now I'm using the white yarn. How to add beads. Okay, so I've woven a little bit more of the yellow. And are you checking to see, are your warp strings staying straight? Or are you pulling it too tight? And if you're pulling it too tight, remember, just wiggle them out. Now, I'm going to add some decoration to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a couple of beads in my weaving. So what I do is I twist the end of my yarn so it's nice and thin. And I'm going to poke it through the bead that I chose. I'm going to put that in my weaving. And I'm just going to keep weaving. And every once in a while, I'm going to put a bead in. And that's how you stick in the beads to add decoration to your weaving. You need to weave about 3 rows and then you can put in another bead. It will get too fat if you put a bead in closer than that. So there's 3 rows and I'm going to put in another bead. Think about the colors you're choosing. Think about the colors of yarn and the bead choices. You'll see there's 2 kinds of beads. There's a bigger bead. It's a round donut-like, and then there's the little pony beads that I just used. So think about the bead size, what you want to use, and every 3 rows is the most you can do. After you finish your first color, you can add in a bead here and there to decorate your weaving. Okay, keep going. Make a pattern, make a design, and when we get to the end, I'll show you how to take it off the loom and what you can do with this really awesome weaving that you've made. I'm almost at the end of my yarn. What do I do when I get to the end? No, we don't yell to Mrs. Sook that we need help. We cut a piece of yarn as wide as our table, and I'm going to tie the 2 pieces together. Make an X with the 2 pieces of yarn. Bring the 1 piece of yarn underneath the other one. Make an X, bring the other piece of yarn in the hole and pull. And keep going. Now when I pulled, look, I pulled this string. I want to pull it out and fix it and keep going. I look forward to seeing your great weavings. When you have woven the front of the loom, you are ready to take the weaving off. Time to remove your weaving from the loom. Okay, so I've woven the whole front, right? We don't weave on the back is regular. So here is the, I guess the tricky part is what I would say, okay? You're gonna peel off the tape. That's the first thing on the one side. And what I would do is then Peel off the other piece of tape if they happen to be on the same side. Okay, we don't need that anymore. Now you're going to flip it over and you are going to cut the strings in the very middle of your weaving on the back. Okay? When we do that, the weaving's going to just pop right off the loom. But we have to be very careful because your weaving will come apart if you do not tie these strings. So what you need to do now is you take 2 strings at a time and you tie them in the double knots. 1, 2, and then the next 2 strings. Tie them all in the double knots. 1, 2, double knots. So in this project, you're going to get very good at tying knots. Okay, double knot. Now you also notice that on the end of this one, there is the last piece of yarn. What I recommend is that you take this piece of yarn and you tie it to the string. Double knot again. 1, 2. Just to make sure that your weaving does not come apart. Okay, go through. And we're going to repeat it on the other end. Okay, so 2 at a time, 2 strings, double knot, 1, 2. 2 strings, 1. If you don't tie these strings carefully and you pull them out, the whole weaving will just fall apart. There's nothing we can do to fix it if you do that. Okay, so you cannot just leave these hanging and you must tie them. Because these are the warp strings. They are what is holding the weaving together right now. So again, tie it in double knots. This time I ended up with 1 string that didn't have anybody to tie it to. So I just tied it with another string that had already been tied to another one. And then the very last, I need to take the end of my weaving yarn. Here's the end, and I'm going to tie it to one of the strings. 1, 2. Done. Okay, take all of your strings out of your weaving. And this is complete. Now, what do you want to do with it? Well, you could turn it into a very nice bracelet or a cuff. Could be a bracelet by just tying these strings on the other side. You could make it into a bookmarker, and you could take a couple of beads and put them on the end. All right, so I could string it, one of the big ones, right? The donut beads through all of my strings. One is not coming through. Where is the end? All the ends need to go through. There we go. And I could tie that on by just doing a loop knot where I take all of them together, make a loop, and go through the hole. Okay. And once I've got that, I could just trim it. Okay. I look forward to seeing what you guys decide to do with these.